so much of this comes from a couple of things that I really want to talk about with you, because I see it come through in a lot of your personal story, which is discipline and frugality. And I know in my own life, I've felt this pendulum swing with these things, seasons of growth and fun and change and spending, and then the seasons of budget and frugality and maximizing discipline happen. And I just want to understand your mindset on this and speak to the person out there that cringes a little bit when they hear some of these words, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think there's this like misconception in pop culture that wealth is spending, and that rich, millionaires are spending and wealth is spending, but wealth, by definition, is what you have left over after you spend, right? So if you make $500,000 a year and you spend $500,000 a year, at the end of the year you have zero. You're broke, and being broke is a very stressful way to live life. You're worried about if your income goes away, then what do? Then you're in real trouble. You're worried about taxes. You're worried about market volatility. You're worried about, the economy. You're worried about everything. Most millionaires are frugal. Most people who build wealth live dramatically below their means, because that is, it's grounding, and it makes you feel better and safer and stronger and happier. And this isn't meant to say, don't spend money, don't live your life. Of course you do, but you just need to live below your means, right? If you're making $60,000 and you're like, I can't imagine living on $50,000, someone does. Someone who makes $50,000 does. And if you can live on 50, making 60, and you invest $10,000 a year, now we're not talking about $200 a month. Now we're talking about $800 a month, or whatever that works out to. Now we're talking about becoming a multi-millionaire in 40 years and a millionaire in some period of time less than that, right? And that's just making $60,000 a year. If you make $60,000, live on $50,000, and then get a raise to $80,000, maybe you spend half that raise and invest half the raise. Now we're talking about investing, $25,000 a year. The numbers get crazy, and you can get so wealthy so fast if you're frugal. But if you go from making $60,000 a year and spending all of it to making $80,000 and spending all of it, your life's not going to change much. You're going to, I don't know, be buying more drinks at bars or something, but your wealth is going to dramatically change, which is you're going to stay broke. And so I think that if you're someone who wants to spend all your money, you have to remember that's going to keep you broke forever. Think about someone who makes a little bit less than you, live like they do, and then devote part of your increase in income to saving and investing in the future, and then you're going to be building a lot of wealth.
Has a lot of this come naturally for you? Because you said this has kind of been part of your mantra, but there's got to be these moments where you've had the temptation that's out there, or you've slipped. It's not a life full of just discipline and Cheerios and water. It's like, are there things in your life that you're spending on dramatically or really enjoying, and then things that are just massively cut out of your life, like different topics, categories of spending?
Yeah, I think the big things, if you're working on like a smaller income, the big things are the things you should focus on first, like housing, car, and food, maybe. Like, those are the three that can really make or break a budget. And so, getting a cheaper house, getting a cheaper car. For me, I think my parents were frugal, so I have some natural frugality. I definitely splurged. I was driving a 2016 Mazda CX-5 up until like 2 months ago, and then I just bought a new Tesla. And so for the first time in my life, I never bought a new car until I was a millionaire. And then my first new car was that Mazda, which I drove for 7 or 8 years. And then I bought this Tesla. And so I have been pretty frugal with cars, but I finally broke down and bought one. But still, like, as a percent of my net worth, the Tesla's actually, I think, the smallest, like the cheapest car I've ever bought. But obviously it's the most expensive by far in terms of raw dollars. Yeah, I don't know. I think I just generally stay frugal, but I do look for opportunities to convert money into happiness. I screwed up recently when I was traveling. I was in Tahoe with my girlfriend, and we had a 7 a.m. flight that was a 45-minute drive away, and we did the math backwards. Like, okay, we basically got to leave at 5 a.m. to drive and get there. Set the alarm for 4:15 to like wake up and pack everything. I set the alarm for 4:15 p.m. by mistake, 100% on me, 100% my fault. We woke up at 5:50, and we couldn't even get to the airport at that time, much less like make the flight or whatever. So, and we had to get back to town, and so I, just frantically like called Southwest, and they switched me to a different airport that we were driving the other direction, and we get in this rental car and drive the wrong way, and calling the rental car company, like all this stuff, and I'm like, whatever, need to get back, and I'm just not going to worry about the cost. It ended up only cost me about $200 to like switch the rental car and all that stuff. But that's one of those things that like when I was poor, that would have really stressed me out. But now that I have some wealth, I just say, hey, that's fully and totally worth it. I'm not going to like, I made a mistake. I'm not going to like be mad at myself or, anything else. Just pay for it and go on with life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that type of stuff is going to happen in life, right? And then it's hopefully not self-inflicting those wounds, but you could consider that one flipping the AM PM. But
classic mistake.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, realistically, just to kind of walk through the numbers you said you have about $3 million in index funds. And would you say that's a majority of the income, the disposable income you're using for, your monthly lifestyle, correct?
Yeah. And so, your podcast is called 25K Income, and index funds are interesting because they don't kick off a ton of income. If you buy a total US stock market index fund, it does produce dividends. Dividends are the cash payments paid by companies to the shareholders. And so, for example, if you buy one share of Apple, I think it's paying like a 25-cent per quarter dividend. So like you're going to get like maybe a little bit more. That's like you get like $1, $1.50 per year per share. So if you bought 100 shares of Apple, you get $100 or whatever it is. But index fund collects all these dividends from all the companies contained within, kind of like collects them all together and then gives you these like bulk payments. As a percent of the cost of a share, it's currently about 2% per year, which means if you put $100,000 into an index fund, you're getting about $2,000 per year in dividends. So dividends are beautiful because it's just literally like cash deposit to your account. And again, if we're doing literally zero, but 2% ain't that good, right? You could put your money into a savings account, currently get 4%. So why would you invest in an index fund? And the answer is most of the growth from an index fund comes in the change of the share price over time, not from the actual dividend payment. So if you look historically at an index fund over the last 100 years or so, it returns about 10% per year in total growth. So 2% of that growth comes from dividends and 8% comes from growth in the share price. And so if you want to live passively on index funds, basically you put a whole bunch of money in, whether it's a little bit at a time, let it grow over time, or all at once, whatever it is. And then you can basically consider what's called the safe withdrawal rate. The safe withdrawal rate is how much money you can take out in total and live off of it and not really put the principal at risk of going to zero. And one kind of generic rule of thumb for the safe withdrawal rate is 4%. So you can put, all this money in an index fund, have it grow at 10% plus volatility, plus inflation, all that stuff, and take out 4% and even adjust your 4% for inflation as time goes on. So if we do that math, $25,000 a month times 12 months a year is $300,000, how much you want in passive income. And so to get $300,000 in passive income from the 4% rule, you need $7.5 million in index funds, which is a ton of money. But again, not crazy. We said $200 a month gets you to $2 million on average. So $800 a month would get you to about there on average over a long period of time. But again, like you said, I like what you said is just start, get some traction, and then start saying, okay, how much earlier can you get that from that 40 years? Start putting more in. So my $300,000 with that safe withdrawal rate is about $120,000 a year, which is $10,000 a month. I don't spend nearly that much to live. I spend about $6,000 per month or something. But yeah, it's pretty darn passive.
Yeah, and I love that you worked that math backwards. I was going to tee you up for that anyway, Jeremy. So thank you for doing that. And I think that's the exercise here for anybody listening. Like, hey, if we're talking index funds, we're talking this, the dividends 2, total growth is 10. We're talking safe withdrawal rate that you can take away from your principal of your index fund, use as, your disposable income. What's that number for you? If it's not $300,000 a year, maybe you're just looking at your break even for your job. That's $45,000 a year. What's that number? Figure that out. That's an amazing target. And then working backwards and saying, okay, how much a month could I do at what age with the time factor? I think this is kind of a fun exercise.
Yeah, what you described is kind of what's called like the FIRE movement, and FIRE stands for financial independence, retire early. And just this kind of idea that you don't need to work until you die. I think that there's just this idea in pop culture that you are supposed to work until you're 65 or 70 or whatever it is, and hope the government kind of like covers you after that. But in reality, if you get enough money invested and have that investment kick off, whether it's like cash flow income like from real estate or a safe withdrawal rate from an index fund, you can retire early. And there's different ways to look at it. There's like lean financial independence, where it's like, okay, just maybe you need $40,000 just to pay your bare minimum expenses. 40,000 times 25 is, what is that like? Sometimes my math is pretty good. I'm gonna do something not good. $1 million. I should know that one. Yeah. So if you could get $1 million invested, then that $1 million can like cover your $40,000 a year living plus inflation indefinitely.
Yeah.
There's FATFI, which is like, okay, FATFI, I think is kind of what your whole podcast is about. It's like $25,000 a month is a ton of money, and you can, other than like buying islands and private jets and stuff, like it's hard to really imagine what $25,000 a month isn't going to buy. You're flying first class, you're staying in luxury resorts, whatever. To get $25,000 a month, we said that's your 7.5 million number, right? That would be considered like FATFI. There's also like barista-fi, where it's like, hey, maybe you don't want to work this job you hate, but working at a Starbucks for $20,000 a year or something is really fun and enjoyable. So you really only need to replace the other $20,000 a year of your income. And so maybe you can get that with like $500,000. So if you work in corporate America for, who knows, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years, you might get $500,000 in savings invested. Then you can go work, on your passion project instead of having to like slave away in corporate America. There's a lot of different ways to think about using this investing to basically support your desired lifestyle.
Yeah, that's cool to hear the different ways. And I hope that opens people's minds up. And so many people that are listening and having these thoughts, these long-term vision thoughts, are interested in solving the money problem. And the cool part about that is if you solve it, the generation after you, not to say that it's just going to be gifted, but like think of the generation before you has this index fund at 7.5 or even 1. It's still there, and it's still creating and it's still growing. And I think that that's the power here. I think when people get frustrated about long-term thinking, it's like, man, when you start thinking about if you have kids or generations beyond you or having something that lives beyond you in a financial sense, this is a super cool way. Jeremy, you essentially solved this. Now you just have to plan so you don't have spoiled brats or anything that are inheriting anything, right? But that's a whole different conversation, Yeah. But how cool.
The book Millionaire Next Door is a really good one because it kind of talks about the concepts of like frugality and building wealth. And it also talks about how people who are big spenders often tend to have the spoiled brats. And, when you are just constantly spending every dollar you make and like taking care of everything for your kids, you're not really instilling the concept of like building something and working for something and working towards something. You're just instilling the concept of Daddy gives me everything and that's how my life operates. And then you're kind of setting them up for failure. And so in addition to being frugal and building wealth, having more physical, actual money to leave beyond your days, I think it also sets a tone to have your children be more successful rather than just, living off you and expecting everything to be a handout.
Yeah, man.